Want to destroy your opponent in just a few moves? This is the Halloween Gambit trap, bold, aggressive, and absolutely deadly. Let's get started. The move knight takes on a 5 may look risky at first, but this is the essence of the Halloween Gambit. By sacrificing a knight early, white gains strong attacking chances, especially in rapid and blitz games. Statistics even show that white scores better here than in quieter lines like bishop to c4 or pawn to d3. After black captures the knight, white immediately gains tempo by attacking both knights with pawn to d4. Black can retreat either the knight to c6 or the knight to g6. However, knight to g4 fails because pawn to e5 creates a double attack, and black will inevitably lose one of the knights. If black chooses knight to c6, white continues aggressively with pawn to d5, chasing the knight. Retreating with knight to e7 does not solve the problem, as white keeps advancing pawns and constantly harassing the knight. Soon, queen to e2 check appears, and black is forced to give up either the bishop or the knight. The safer option, knight to e5, is met by pawn to f4, gaining space and attacking the other knight. White steadily pushes black backward while building a powerful and dominant center. After pawn to e5, most players are forced to retreat again. White should continue pushing the pawns, creating a massive central pawn structure that restricts black's position. Black is pushed into awkward knight placements. Even if black tries a pin with the queen, white responds in kind, and the knight still has to retreat. Once the center is fully advanced, white captures on d6, and the central pawn completely strangles black's position, leaving black cramped, passive, and helpless. If black plays a normal developing move like knight to f6, white can immediately give a check and win material, so black must proceed very carefully. To avoid this danger, black usually creates space for the king. The two most common defensive moves are queen to b6 and queen to f6. If black chooses queen to b6, white improves the position with knight to b5, attacking the c7 square while also adding another defender to the powerful central pawn. This knight to b5 idea appears repeatedly in many variations, so it is very important to remember it. Black must now stop the fork on c7, and king to d8 often looks like the most logical move. White continues the attack by pushing the pawns and maintaining strong central control. If black tries knight to h4, that knight will eventually be lost, so the most common and practical response is knight to e5. White should continue developing pieces with tempo, never allowing black time to organize counterplay. Black will often try to defend with pawn to f6, and white can calmly move the queen, keep supporting the advanced pawn, and prepare to castle. If black attempts pawn to a6 to chase away the knight and then capture the pawn, white responds with a bishop move that attacks the queen. After the queen retreats, black is in serious trouble. Queen to a 5 check, followed by knight to c7 check, wins the rook. Even if white eventually loses the advanced pawn, the position remains excellent. White can continue development, bring the knight into play, castle on the queen side, and black is left struggling with a weak king and undeveloped pieces stuck on the back rank. Let us return to the position after queen to b6, and now examine what happens if black chooses queen to f6 instead. This move attacks both central pawns and changes the situation. In this case, playing knight to b5 immediately can be risky, because black may respond with knight to f4, creating strong threats. Even if white later wins a rook, the king can become exposed, allowing black to attack with the queen, knight, and even the bishops. For this reason, when black plays queen to f6, the best approach is to begin with a check. After black blocks the check, white can safely continue with knight to b5. Even if the queens are exchanged, white keeps the initiative with a double attack that forces the king to move. White can then target the pawn with bishop to e3. If black responds with pawn to b6, white should castle on the king side and place a rook on the open file. Continue advancing the pawns, as the strong central pawn will keep black's position cramped. If black instead tries pawn to a6 to chase the knight and capture the pawn, white can start a series of checks, gradually winning material. Eventually, white captures the rook, collects additional pawns, and reaches a clearly winning position. Finally, going back to the position after pawn to d5, we have already seen the ideas against knight to e5. If black retreats with knight to b8, the plan remains the same. Keep chasing the knight, push it backward, advance the pawns, and trade them to restrict black's position. If black tries to create space for the king, knight to b5 is the key move. Should black respond with knight to a6, that knight is placed on a terrible square. White can calmly develop the bishops, and the position becomes extremely uncomfortable for black. Black's pieces are paralyzed and lack coordination, while white can bring the entire army into the attack. Now let us look at how to counter the Halloween Gambit as white. The game begins with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, knight to f3, and knight to c6, reaching the 4 knights opening. In the Halloween Gambit, white sacrifices the knight on a 5 and immediately strikes the center with pawn to d4. We have already examined the main ideas when black retreats with knight to c6. Now consider the alternative, knight to g6. White continues aggressively with pawn to e5, attacking the knight. Because several squares are blocked or controlled by white's pieces and the queen, the knight has no good squares and is forced to retreat. The engine often recommends developing with bishop to c4, but a more surprising and practical move is queen to f3, which can catch many opponents off guard. Black usually replies with pawn to d6, after which white develops the bishop, increasing pressure on the f7 square. If black tries to defend with the queen, white continues normal development, steadily building pressure with all pieces. Sometimes black plays bishop to a6, offering an exchange, but white has a clever continuation to keep the initiative. White can first capture the pawn. If black captures the bishop, there is no danger, as white has a strong queen check and later recaptures the bishop. If black becomes greedy and captures more pawns, queen to a4 pins the knight and creates serious problems. Even if black defends, pawn to f4 forces the knight to move, keeping white in control. After queen to f3, the most common response remains pawn to d6. Another idea for black is to develop the bishop and pin the knight. In that case, white plays bishop to c4, again targeting f7. Black usually responds with queen to e7, after which white castles. When white eventually exchanges the bishop for the knight, white's pieces completely dominate the center. The final position speaks for itself. White has an excellent pawn structure and perfectly coordinated pieces, all ready to attack, while black's pieces are passive, cramped, and have very limited activity for the next several moves. The big question is how to counter this aggressive opening when playing as black. After pawn to d4, the knight has 2 retreat squares. The best choice is knight to g6, because knight to c6 gives white exactly what they want. Just look at how many free moves white gains when the knight goes to c6. Constant attacks on the knights, forcing them backward again and again, while white calmly builds an extremely powerful central position. By choosing knight to g6, white can only attack one knight at a time. Even if black has to retreat once, it is manageable. If white plays queen to f3, this is the moment black must fight back and prevent white from building too much initiative. When you are up material but facing strong activity, it is often correct to return some material to shut down the attack. This simple idea is the key to neutralizing openings like the Halloween Gambit. Instead of trying to hold on to the extra knight, black should play pawn to d5. Allow white to capture the pawn. Capturing with the pawn is not ideal for white because it helps black activate the bishops, which white would prefer to avoid. After pawn to d5, white will usually capture with the queen. Black can then exchange pieces, gaining valuable breathing space. Since knight to c7 is white's main threat, black can safely move the king. Even though white keeps 2 central pawns, black maintains a material advantage and can continue the game with confidence. Even if white chooses to develop a bishop instead of playing queen to f3, black should still play pawn to d5. White loses time capturing the pawn, while black gains a tempo by attacking the bishop, allowing smooth development and securing the f7 square. By controlling the d5 square, developing calmly, and keeping flexible castling options, black removes all immediate danger. With no real threats left, black reaches a comfortable position, a simple, reliable, and effective way to neutralize the Halloween Gambit.